It is 7:06. I would like to call the meeting to order. As you all know, the meeting is live streamed. And we have the quorum to proceed. Next item, let us stand for the land acknowledgement, please.
If you are able. So we acknowledge that we reside on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through the learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives. Miigwech.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. Now, this is a review and approval of the proposed agenda. You all receive draft agenda in the mail out. Thanks, Liane. Anyone to propose the approval of the agenda? Yes, that's what I'm saying. The agenda is on the floor, please. Mover.
This is through you, Chair. This is Steve. I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone to second?
Second.
Thank you, Leo. Yeah. Any other question, comment? I see none opposed. Approved. Thank you. Declaration of possible conflict of interest. Does anyone, based on what will be discussed today, has any potential or possible conflict of interest in the room? I see none. Online? I see none too. Thank you. Very quick. The next item is approval of the SIAC minute from September 2023. I want to thank, Liane, who has been kind of sending all this, every Wednesday prior to the meetings. I remember at one point it was the weekend that we received the materials, but now every Wednesday we can already plan that on Wednesday we'll receive them. Thank you, Liane.
Welcome.
I hope we had a chance to review the minutes. I see that, we all have the chance to review the minutes. Anyone moving to approve the minute from September 23rd, September 18, 2023? Thank you. Yes, thank you, Melissa. A second? In the room? Online? I think we are a lot of us online, right? Mm-hmm. We are so, quiet.
Lots of people online.
In the room, I see Richard, Nora, we were all here last month.
Sorry? I'm getting kicked out of my internet, so I'm having panic.
Go ahead, I recognize you, Nora. Anything? You say that you second?
I can't hear.
We have the minute from last month on the floor.
Sure.
You second it. Thank you.
Pick something.
Anyone opposing the adoption or approval of the minute from September 18, 2023? I see none. Approve. Thank you, everyone. And now the next item is the action log. I'll please ask Lian to, it is we kind of upgrade our way of sharing materials. You know, that is very sophisticated and I think Lian, gave a training for some people who are still, learning this sophisticated way of sharing. Can you please share that the action log
Yes.
so that we can see it?
Yep.
Thank you. I mean, this is really, it's a digital world now. Just go there and click the Google Drive? Yeah. Google Drive, you go there and click, you see everything, one place, one-stop shop.
Sorry. So I just have to share.
Okay, thank you. Can you please, Lian, walk us through and look where it is not incomplete from the previous action item, and I know that in our materials there are some attached document that will probably complement, some of the complete or incomplete there. We have the
I think all of the ones that were added from September 18th have been addressed. Some are ongoing, but if we look in the last column, it's hard because it's such a, I'll have to try to make it a little bit less long. But there are several updates in the leadership report that address items that are on the action log as follow-ups from last month. So there were several items, just going to scroll down, that were added on the 18th. And if we look over, and this is in the action log Google folder for anybody who wants to actually look at it live and not on the screen, so they can move around themselves. Small. Can you zoom? I can try to zoom, but then you only see part of it. Are there any specific ones you want to look at?
I think that is, we all see, the action log, the action item from last meeting, you see that at the bottom. And one thing that I, also wanted us to, to pay attention to, there's Appendix A from the mail out, where there's a two-pager of, special education data service level data 2022-23. I think that is, I invite us to take a look at that and to see if there's anything from what we have been asking here is missing from what is there. That is a snapshot of some of the requests that we made here. I want to give us, yes, I see Richard.
A question on the action log through you, Jean-Paul.
Yes.
I notice it says the one section about the barriers, and it says it's done, Google folder created and shared with all SEAC members. Where is that folder accessible here? I'm just trying to find it now online here. Whereabouts, and is it possible to identify the folder by name that we can search it then in the Google Drive? Is that an option, or how do we connect to it? How do I find it?
I'll turn it to either Liane or
Sure.
yes, to tell us, because she's the expert of
So
having-
there is a, sorry, I'm just looking.
So Leanne, in the meantime, Leanne had sent out an email with the link to the folder with the
Right.
document to all members to go in and put their barriers
Right.
that families are facing.
Can we get that link, when we do the action plan, when there is an action item that happens, can we also include that link to the
Sure,
document? in there?
I'll link it to the.
So if somebody is looking at the action plan, they don't have to go back through their emails?
Yep.
Thanks.
It is under, there is a folder called Action Plan Ideas.
I saw that, yes. Okay, thank you. Got it.
And within that folder, there are two subfolders, one for community and one for associations.
Thank you.
Any other question, comment? Yes, Liu?
I think line 6, we can probably put that as, we can remove that line, I think. It's not a priority at the moment anymore. If it surfaces again, we can bring it up again. I'm saying that because Autism Ontario is on it as responsible, and we can probably leave it on hold for now.
We add a comment there, to leave it without removing it, just a comment, yeah.
Yeah, you can put it on hold or something.
Okay.
Otherwise, it looks like we're,
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Questions? Please take a look at that and also the document Appendix A, and to see if a snapshot of some of the, the motion that we had here, followed up by staff. Take a look and see if there's anything, that you think is missing. Please, you may bring this up by the end of the meeting today, so that we can make sure that we are all on the same page with staff, because that is on some of these items. Yeah, that's a good snapshot. Okay. If there's no question, comment, thank you. Now that is we have item number 2. We have an update from Autism Ontario. Leo?
thank you, Chair. I think the update is relatively short. We had discussed the movement of students in ISPs in the last meeting, and there were some questions that were raised specifically regarding questions that we have received back from parents. We had a very productive conversation with staff offline, which answered quite a few of our questions and gave us a lot of information that we can use to answer back parents, and also some guidance and collaborative work into how to better do some additional homework with our parents to further and get more data that might be more helpful as well. So we're doing that offline. No update for now. Just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the staff for working collaboratively with us, specifically Nandi, which we've had a few chats on working with us to understand the problem a little bit better and eventually solve it. So thank you.
Your thanks to Autism Ontario and staff, for the work, collaborative work on some of this question. I remember, at the beginning it was already a motion. Now it turned out to be a conversation with staff, and we found out exactly, how you can go back and help, Autism Ontario client. Thank you. Next item. Any comment before we move? Any comment on Autism Ontario feedback here? No? Thank you. Now, the next item is, leadership report. Now, we know that we start, discussing the developing an action plan last month with, under the leadership of Associate Director Siruski. I think she'll probably have some more things to share with us today. Thank you to you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I will speak fairly briefly. I'm going to give a high-level summary of what we see in the shared Google Doc, and then I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Palmer to go over the written report that is in the agenda. So members of SEAC, thank you very much for our Learning Center representatives as well as our association members who have gone into the Google Doc to identify themes and barriers that have been echoed to you through families. And I'll just take a minute to quickly summarize what we see is there and then discuss next steps. So one LC representative talked about the process by which students are discussed at IPRCs and team meetings as not always having the appropriate documentation, and what are the steps that that team takes in order to appropriately follow identification as a barrier and concern about not having the documentation necessary. For our associations, you can go ahead and join me in the Google Doc. Some common themes that are there. Not all associations have put in their summaries. When a member has put in a summary, it is very extensive and detailed, and my gratitude for that. School exclusions and refusal to admit is a repeated concern from a number of association leaders. I would say that parental involvement is also a continued and repeated theme, that what is requested is communicating in an enhanced way to parents about how they are able to participate in the guidance of their child's education. But even when their involvement is present, the attitudinal barriers that may exist at a school to be responsive to parents' input. Educator training is also a repeated theme, and what was noted was discrepancy from perhaps one professional development opportunity to another, and how to bring not only coherence but application of the professional learning that is there. IEPs, again a repeated theme, not only in how they are written, but how they support the program of a student while they are in school. And similarly to refusal to admit, I would say is exclusions. And I'll pair those together because it is talking about a reduction or a full exclusion to access for learning. And then lastly, similar to the theme about consistency of professional development, this individual has itemized it as a standard level of care. And I think that is really meaning what is a standard level of service from one class or from one school to another. So through you, Chair, as for next steps, what staff are recommending and would appreciate is if members of SEAC would appreciate another week or so, if they have not yet completed their submission within this Google Drive. It's been a full month since we've been together, so just to be heightening and pointing a spotlight on the importance of really hearing from you and the families that you represent. What you put as input will matter tremendously. And then staff would greatly appreciate a short-term 1-month ad hoc committee with SEAC members to take the information, Chair, that has been submitted, sift through it, and provide a summary in a more detailed way, and come back to SEAC with 3 suggested foci that staff together with SEAC can develop more fulsomely to discuss as steps that staff can take to enhance the programs and support for students that we may put into our action plan and can be our work for this current year. So over to you for consideration and invitation for an ad hoc working group with staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Associate Director Siruski. I think that is if before I recognize Richard, before I let Richard speak, and if I may suggest, that we kind of slow the pace, switching to everything Google Drive. If it is possible at the beginning to have a kind of summary that we can send to even, a table that we can send to people, to do it. Because myself, I think that is slowly, because during the day I'm in SharePoint, and I'm not used, yet to go to Google Drive and so on. I mean, if we can slowly, get us to get used, to Google Drive with some of this in the meantime, and also sharing some of this same material so that we can, slowly move into being in the Google Drive world. That's the comment that I will make. And thanks for doing everything that you're doing. I think that I'll let maybe Richard speak before, if you have any other comment that.
And just regarding Google Drive, through you, Chair, if there's any member who is not able to access Google Drive, to be sending an email to myself, I would be happy to add it, absolutely. Please don't let Google Drive be a barrier. And we'll certainly take your request, Chair. Once we bring back the information, we'd be very happy to turn the summary into a Word document. That's not a problem at all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Richard.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Through you, Mr. Chair. Some questions regarding the leadership report, and kind of on the sideline a bit. 3 quick ones. The first one was, I know in some of the school boards, when the PD days are happening, the teachers actually send a note home to the parents to say that there's a PD day and the teacher's going to be taking this particular subject. I'm wondering if we could kind of look at the reverse of that for the TDSB, where there is a calendar of PD days for the year. Would it be possible to outline on that calendar what the special education topics are that are going to be covered in which days, and then we have some idea what sort of training is being provided if this doesn't already exist? I'll go to my next question. In terms of the comment about parental involvement, participation in a child's education, is there a document out there or any kind of guidance for parents to say, these are the sort of questions you can have input on, and these are the sort of things that can change based on your input? I think that's the thing in going into a restaurant and saying, person in the restaurant saying, what would you like for dinner? You kind of ask, what is the menu? And I'm wondering if there's some sort of menu that we could be giving parents to give them some better guidance in that area. And on my last question, and I've noticed in your report you make reference to the SEP-RC motion, etc. Currently within the board, is the SEP-RC only available to children with very high medical needs? Because I have an example here from a parent that the principal is telling them they can proceed with the SEP-RC meeting, yet the child's already enrolled in school. They're trying, I think the child is now in the classroom, and I thought SEP-RCs were only when the child wasn't enrolled in the school. So I'm a little confused, and I imagine others maybe on this committee need some clarity on, are SEP-RCs who are they for currently right now? And if a student is enrolled in school, will there be a SEP RC for that student, or is that time passed? Thank you.
I think that is, if, I don't know if it's you or associate director or system superintendent.
Through you, Chair, we hadn't, for the questions that Richard posed, they weren't yet connected to System Superintendent Palmer's oral report. So I wonder if we hold those, presentation is made, and perhaps she can weave in the responses to the presentation.
That's fair enough.
Thank you.
Any other comment, questions?
Yes, it's David. I've got my hand up if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, great. Thank you. And hi to everybody. Two things. One is, just so you know, Google Drive is a major accessibility problem. Leanne, I appreciate, is doing her best to send me stuff, but if these are going to be ongoing documents that are changing and being added to, it won't be realistic for Leanne to sort of email me regularly with, and me looking at and trying to update and keep track. It's not practical. I wouldn't mind if we could explore either a parallel thing like using Dropbox or something that is not Google, because it is a known accessibility problem for people using screen readers. With respect to just a quick thing, I'm happy to serve on that 1 month working group, whatever it's going to be called. I did this twice before for SEAC, and I'd be happy to again to participate in it. And finally, just the answer to Richard's question, is there something out there that could help people know about this? There actually is. It's a video I produced that's captured, that's available online, and I've been urging TDSB to share it with parents because the feedback has been from parents that we've gotten is that they found the content really quite helpful. Which I find gratifying. So, and if anybody wants it, I can send it to you. You can share it through your associations, but to our staff, I do encourage you to make use of it. It's free. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, David. I think for the compatibility, I'll let, do you want to speak to that? Yes, I'll let Trustee Arts, speak to that. Go ahead. Yes, the compatibility.
Google Drive?
Yeah, compatibility.
Oh, okay. So David, you mentioned a different platform. So maybe we can take this offline and discuss what's a better, different ways to access this. We can connect with the accessibility team here at the TDSB. Just a housekeeping item for the online chat. It's not being monitored, so if you have a question, please put your hand up. It's just to take notes and keep track of time and everything. There's nobody can monitor that, so the best place for questions and things like that would be just to put your hand up and then ask the question in the room, and then people in the room can't see the chat necessarily. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thanks, Trustee Arts. Yes, Nora?
This is about what's in the leadership report, right? I'm asking questions about leadership report at this point.
Not yet. I mean, for the portion, the associate director, portion.
I'm all excited. Sorry, I can wait till they deliver it.
Okay. Now,
Richard, jump the gas.
up to you, not Nandi.
Enthusiasm.
Up to you. Yes.
Thank you. So with regards to the leadership report, I understand that some members have said that they don't need staff to review the leadership report as it's been shared in the meeting mail out. Please understand that SEAC meetings is not only for SEAC members, but also for members of the general public who may not have viewed from last Wednesday the leadership report. And so that is why we do go through, we don't read the entire report. we do a summary of bits and pieces so members of the public who may be attending SEAC meetings can see what is in the leadership report. We have an obligation to share with all members of the public as well as members of SEAC what the TDSB is doing to support students with special education needs, and I would say all students. So I'll go through, like I said, a summary of each of the points of the leadership report, and then I have a part two for the leadership report that was brought forward by SEAC members. So in terms of the staff development goals for SEAC, we follow what we call the 4 Cs. We've been focusing on this since last year, and we know that change takes time, so it's not change that can happen in 1 year. Our goal is to build coherence and alignment across the TDSB in terms of special education programs, services, and supports to support student success. And the 4 areas are changing mindsets, capacity building, challenging and dismantling oppressive structures, and communication and engagement. And if we drill down further in those areas, we're focusing on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to actions. We're focusing on inclusion, specifically anti-ableism as part of anti-oppression, equity, and well-being. Fostering positive learning conditions in classrooms, and fourthly, universal design for learning, UDL, differentiated instruction, DI, and culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, CRRP. We know that students with special education needs have intersecting identities, and they're not only defined by their special education needs. Next slide, please. In terms of professional learning, we continue as part of our C of capacity building to offer a variety of professional learning sessions for staff at all levels. This includes voluntary as well as mandatory sessions, and this is for superintendents and administrators, support staff, and teaching staff as well. And some of these are more formal, and some of them are very informal drop-in sessions for staff to come and ask specific questions related to special education. Next slide, please. Assistive technology, we have a number of new technology programs that we're working to build capacity of school-based staff to support student learning. And on the screen there are some, but I'll read them out as well for those not able to access that. So we have Read and Write, which is Google, another program called Mendomo, Orbit Note, and WeVideo. Those are just some examples that we use to support students with organizing their thoughts and ideas and doing mind maps and other visuals that they may use and audio pieces to support their learning. Next slide, please. We are very pleased that we applied to the ministry for a number of grants, and we were able to get 2 grants that we will be using to support students in MID intensive ISPs, and this is in collaboration with our occupational therapy and physiotherapy services, OTPT, and we will be focusing specifically on universal design for learning for that. And the second grant we will be using to promote self-advocacy skills with students with disabilities. And students will be taking on a leadership role there in terms of not only their own self-advocacy skills, but co-learning and engaging in learning with peers around their own abilities, I don't want to say disabilities, and focusing on student voice as a propeller there. Next slide, please. As part of the meeting mail-out, we did provide, as per the TDSB SEAC Year at a Glance calendar, ANSYS data from the 2022-23 school year. And you'll notice that it's October 2022 because we did not yet submit the June 2023 data. When that becomes available, we will be bringing it to SEAC as well. And those data sets were broken down by elementary and secondary students. Next slide, please. There's an update on the motion that was the SEPRC motion that was brought forward at the end of June. Because it was in June, it went to board on September 27th, and the board decided that the motion would be referred to staff to communicate with SEAC the board's plan for reviewing the SEPRC process and the direction of the TDSB with regard to this process upon completion of the review. Next slide, please. And as always, we communicate out to our entire system. We have a newsletter for all staff. We also have monthly communication to principals and superintendents, and we have communications to the entire TDSB staff as well as TDSB leadership staff. And we promote whatever months or weeks or year days there might be. So October is Learning Disabilities Month, and for the leadership report, we have this blurb, but we do provide school-based staff with extensive strategies that they may use in their classrooms to support students with learning disabilities, and as an example. Next slide, please. And October is also ADHD Awareness Month, and similarly, we provide information about how to support students with ADHD. Next slide, please. And the other two pieces of data are the IPRC cumulative data as well as the psychological assessment data. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nandi. I think that is, we go back to the question that Richard asked first.
Richard, sorry, could you mind just reframing your questions for me? I was over there doing something else. I apologize.
No worries. Through Mr. Chair. So the first one was on the professional learning. Is there a way that SEAC can get a list of the topics that will be covered through the year and sort of what that calendar is of PD days? I know there's a lot of different topics, but I think it would be very important if SEAC's role is to make recommendations to the board about special education services, it would be very helpful to know what training is being given to staff. So that was the one question. The next one was regarding SEPRCs. For a student and a family right now, as of today, drawing the line in the sand as of today, are SEPRCs available and being provided to all families that want them, or are they for only specific exceptionalities? And if you could clarify actually who the SEPRCs are for now and what the message is being delivered to principals and that, because I see possibly a disconnect. And so let's, maybe if we want to just hit those too, because there was another one that came up. I noticed you're doing UDL for MID ISPs, but why do we, I don't want to use the word limit it, but why do we limit it by exceptionality where there might be staff and other exceptionalities that could benefit, with teaching other exceptionalities that could benefit from this information? And lastly, on the monthly notices of what disabilities are being covered and like ADHD, et cetera, is there any way that information could be provided to CX so we can actually see what staff is seeing about, you know, ADHD month and awareness, et cetera? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the questions. In terms of Awareness Month, sure, we can add that in to the respective leadership reports. I'm just making a note here. It's hard to talk and write at the same time. For PA days, can you get a list? Yes, we can give a list of what's been done so far, Richard. We try to be responsive in terms of our professional learning for staff. So some of it is mandatory or where we see a need system-wide, because we do get the system-wide perspective. But we also have specific learning needs that are brought forward by staff that are based on specific student learning needs. So we can't give you an entire year's worth, but certainly what's coming up and what's happened and what we intend to do. We can certainly put something together for that. In terms of SEPRC, a SEPRC, as outlined in the special education plan, is not for any parent who requests one. A parent may request a SEPRC if they're not yet registered in the TDSB, and there's specific criteria which is outlined in the special education plan. And then the special education staff and the professional support services staff, whichever staff is needed, will come in. We'll look at the the documentation, observations, a number of pieces to determine if the student is eligible for a SEP-RC or not. If they're eligible for a SEP-RC, then that process is started. If they're not eligible, we welcome the student at their home school, and we work with the school-based staff and the family, and if needed, it's not always needed, we go through the IPRC process for that student.
So maybe just for point of clarification.
Can you lower your mic?
Point of clarification. So the way I believe the special ed plan now covers it, it was specifically for medically fragile students, I thought?
So it's medically fragile, physically, students with physically complex needs as well. As I've mentioned before at SEAC, TDSB has very old buildings which are not all physically accessible. So some of those students may require specific equipment, for their physical needs as well as medical equipment.
So for
Richard, please, if I may, I think that is for the SEP-RC. We had a motion here to lift the restriction. We know that there was a restriction, and we said that we went to the board asking to remove the restriction. And what the board did, I think, thanks Nandi, for putting that in your update. And the board said that staff review the SEP-RC as a whole and communicate with SEA on how it's working. And now, the one thing that the question that I have for staff now is about the timeline for the review and when we will expect to have that year and to discuss, to see all the restrictions that we already see happening.
Jean-Paul, I fully understand that there is a process in place where it is being reviewed. My question is, as of today, as of this moment in time, if a child has MID or DD, exceptionality, and they're enrolled in the school, are they eligible to have a SEP-RC? Because that's what the family is being told.
So I'm going to answer that as the last question, Richard, and I'm happy to connect with you about other questions you may have. But if the SEP-RC is for students who are not yet registered in TDSB, and I apologize if there are families that are being given incorrect information. Please, again, if parents are hearing something that's contrary to what's in the special education plan, if they can, and they're hearing that from the principal, please go to the superintendent. The superintendent will coordinate the appropriate staff to clarify for families. And that, Richard, goes to one of our 4 Cs, which is capacity building, to ensure that our administrators are aware of what our processes are.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Thanks, Richard, for your patience.
Sorry, can I respond to Richard's last question around why MID ISP for the pilot project, Richard? It's a pilot project with limited funding. Last year we did apply. We applied to every grant that we see, and we were able to do DD ISPs last year, and this year we're doing MID ISPs. Like I said, this project is in collaboration with OTPT services, and they identified the need for self-advocacy in these particular groups, and it's a small group of students that we're able to work with. So these are the 2 groups, last year DD and this year MID, that we're working with.
Okay, thank you. Nora, yes.
Thank you. I guess mostly mine's a comment from Inclusion Action in Ontario. So I was looking at the ONSIS data, and I'm looking for the placement by exceptionality and the 5 placement options. And for anybody with an intellectual disability, there's a significant number, to the point where, even in elementary, where there's fewer than 100 kids with developmental disability in the regular class. So it doesn't look like an inclusive practice when I look at your data. So when I'm looking at your data, it looks to me like if you have an intellectual disability, you're probably going to be placed into a special education class. And so I guess I'm wondering, and now I'm hearing like there are pilot projects if you're in classes about needs you have. So again, I communicate my organization's concerns about what inclusivity means and who's supposed to be getting this information. If it's only going to ISP teachers, how do we ever break down the wall if that's where every child's going to be served when regular class teachers aren't learning that? And the data is looking like they're not there anyway. So how do you get out of this cycle? If you're talking inclusivity, I don't see it.
So Nora, thank you for that. I'm actually working on something called the Special Education Fact Sheet to bring to SEAC that breaks down, these are our students with special education needs in the TDSB, and I completely agree. The data for TDSB is misleading in the sense that we have students on IEPs, as you know, who are not identified. And so when you look at the data at large, and if we were to say students receiving special education programs and services, it's a large number. And it shows that they're in regular classes, when in actuality, the kids who are identified with an exceptionality, most of them are in ISPs. So we are actually, one of our 4 Cs is changing mindsets, and that is what we've been working on, from mandatory professional learning with the entire senior team, right down to support staff, around changing mindsets around inclusion and ISPs.
Thank you so much for that. And can the minutes note that our association had concerns about this data, just to make sure that it's registered, that we want it. That's why we want to watch it over time, is just to see growth, right? And see change. That's what we're hoping for. So it's not like, I'm going to do anything huge about this, except for say, how are we moving and how are we taking down barriers? That's all. Thank
And
you.
if I may add, that would
You know,
certainly be nominated as a shared goal.
Dine?
I think David was up before me, so I think he put up his hands first, and then I can go after. If I don't want to go out of turn. I think David was first. David?
Thanks.
David.
Okay. I in your report you refer to Google Read and Write as an access technology which the board embraces, and the board has embraced Google Classroom and Google Read and Write. I don't know, Nandy and Louise, if you know, but these present major accessibility problems for blind students and those who use screen readers. Google generally is not a good place for us. So by the board being so heavily invested in it and making sure the staff are all sort of primed to use it, it's basically a sign saying blind students are going to be second class. And it means that there's more burden on your very understaffed teachers of the visually impaired to try to make up for this. So it's creating a barrier and then not having enough teachers of visually impaired because of chronic understaffing and underfilling in that area. So I want to identify that, and this is for a low incidence disability that often gets overlooked. And when just to wrap up, when the report is presented as if this is a good thing, and for some students it is. I'm not saying that everybody should just use one thing, but if you're talking about principles like universal design and learning, this contradicts it. If you're talking about accessibility, this also contradicts it. And so I think you need to go back and take a serious look at what IT you're using to make sure you're not creating more barriers for low incidence vulnerable students, especially when there's an understaffing of the people who are needed to try to help students overcome them. Thanks. Back to you, JP.
Okay, thank you, David. I think that is because we already discussed this previously regarding, SEAC member accessibility for all this Google, instrument. I think I would suggest that we add that, we have we expand the conversation to include students with special needs. If it makes sense, so that thanks, David, for raising this. What we'll do is add this to the conversation that we already have as action item for SEAC members. With
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And,
Okay. Do you want me to go now?
yeah, Don. Yes, Don.
Okay, sure, yeah. My question was related to the leadership report as well. It was kind of a little bit on the same tone of what Nora was talking about, but the opposite end. I'm looking at about 50% when I look at the onus report that are not that are students with non-identified exceptionalities in the.
Dan, can you please speak to your mic?
Oh.
We're not.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No. Yes, it's better now.
Okay, I'll try to go closer. Okay, so I'm talking about my question's related to the leadership report, and it's kind of related to Nora's question, but a little bit opposite. So on the data, we have about 50% or more of students who are not identified, who are in the classrooms, the regular classrooms. And I think you mentioned that some of the professional development coming forward covered many of the areas, but I didn't see much special development for teachers in mainstream classrooms to learn about the things we need them to learn about. And I understand that a lot of it goes through the administrators. But my concern is, what accountability is there if the administrator doesn't bring it down to the teacher level? The teachers are a big population and they're serving half of our students. And I know I know there's limitations and so forth, and, we're doing things, but I just want to know, what are we doing for that population of teachers in relation to professional development, other than just having the administrators learn about it? And how is it getting down, and how is it going to be accountable if they don't learn about it? Like, is there a measurement system? Like, how are we going to get further on this area?
Yes, Nandi.
Thank you. And thanks for the question, Diane. All of our professional learning, like I said earlier, is offered to staff at all levels. So that means superintendents, administrators, teaching staff, support staff. We even include our communication. We ask our principals to send our monthly staff newsletter to caretakers, secretaries, everyone in the school, because we know that those staff members can actually come into contact with students with special education needs. We do some release time for our teaching staff. We also do optional professional learning for teaching staff, and we also have modules that we create for principals that they can use with their teaching staff. So we don't just do our professional learning targeted at ISBs. It's for all teaching staff, for those that teach in integrated sites, congregated sites as well. And I just want to respond that the tools that I mentioned for the assistive technology slide, those were only some samples and examples, and we look for students who require technology. It's done on a case-by-case, student-by-student basis, and the students get the tools that they need. So our blind low vision students use Narrator and VDA, as well as Google Read and Write for students who are able to. So we have a variety of tools, and we really use precision and personalization for technology for our students.
Yeah. So I understand that, and that's totally fine. And I'm not going to go on. I just, I guess my just suggestion maybe going forward is, if we could maybe do some kind of a measurement of, like, I know a lot of this professional learning is optional, but maybe we could sort of somehow maybe have some kind of incentive or measurement or something for teachers to actually take advantage of all this wonderful training you have, right? Because it just feels like a lot of it's still optional, and I just don't know how much is going to be used. So again, just a suggestion, food of thought, but just something out there to see that all this great stuff is being used, or how can we encourage people to use it more? So anyway, that was just my comment.
Okay, thank you, Diane. I think that is noted. And if I may add anything to this agenda item, is thanks to staff for the ministry grant on removing barriers for students with disability. If it is possible to share, with us some of the targets, benchmark that you have in your application, so that we can all together monitor, and celebrate at the end of the cycle what were the success, removing these barriers. And a question, a suggestion to all of us is to, we receive a cut, or an ONSYS data cut, and this is something that we all requested. If as a member, each of us, we kind of reflect on the use of this data to see what implication, kind of reviewing, analyzing data has on our association or the client we serve, so that we can have a time at the next month for each of us to reflect on that. It will be great, so that we really see, we know, we will demonstrate that we're not just kind of asking about this data. We really use them, and to try to make things happen, in our associations, in communities. Thank you. The next item here is trustee report. Yeah, sorry, you go ahead. Sorry.
So this is a follow-up to the leadership report. I don't know if we need to spend a lot of time on it or not. I'm happy to not. This is about the aging waitlist data on the assessments and IPRCs. So I have written a number of emails about it since June, September, October. Basically, we spent a couple of years trying to get this data, and then we worked out a really good process a couple of years ago, just an efficient way, because we get a lot of concerns and complaints from families about how long it takes to get an assessment or an IPRC. So what we started getting in every monthly leadership report is just a simple couple of charts that just show not just how many assessments or IPRCs have been done since, say, September, but how many are outstanding and how old those are. So we found it really helpful because we could see that staff were working on it, they were improving, the numbers were coming down, and I think it also helps to counteract maybe some misconception about how long the delays were. So we just had a very simple 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 10 months and over. And then we can see if are there 10 people waiting? Are there 1,000 people waiting? If there's 1,000, have they all been waiting under 3 months, which I think we could all understand? Or have they all been waiting more than 10 months? So this was typically provided by Psych just as part of the regular report. I did see some of that data in our September leadership report, which I was happy about. Nandy's shaking her head, but if you go back to reports before that, say before June, that information was always provided. So it just saves a lot of time in meetings and a lot of questions, and we can also respond to parents on that. I think understanding how much is in the backlog and how old it is more relevant to people than just getting some abstract numbers on how many have been done so far.
Oh, okay, thanks for the question, Lisa. I think that is, staff will take it and see how to bring back those assessments. Is that fair to say?
We'll take that under advisement, but my understanding is it's been psych assessments, not IPRCs that we've done that for, because we can't do an IPRC without the psych assessment data. So the psych assessment piece was provided, but we'll take it back and work with PSS staff on that piece.
That would be great. I think we were actually getting both of those, and sometimes Psych would provide notes, which were very helpful explanation. They would say things like, especially during COVID, X number of families are still on the wait list because they don't want to come in for assessments because they're worried about whatever, or they've moved away, but they don't want their name taken off the list because they might be coming back. So it was just a really shorthand, efficient communication tool, and I do think that we were receiving assessment and IPRC information. Okay. If we could continue that, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. I hope staff will take it back and try to bring it, bring that, include those assessments going forward. Now, thanks, Melissa. Trustee report.
Okay, thanks. Leanne sent out the trustee report, and I just want to highlight the piece that's attached to that. The ministry recently released the consultation on the grants for student needs. So every fall, the Ministry of Education invites the public to give them feedback before they do their budget process for the grants for student needs. There's a consultation guide that's sent out that has specific questions that they're looking for answers for. And then there's as boards, we send back a whole open-ended piece of needs. This is the first year that I've seen that the ministry is asking for specific feedback on something around special education. So included in there, the ministry is asking specifically for feedback from the public, from boards from the public on, the special incidents portion funding and special equipment amount allocations. So the SIP and C allocations, they want to, quote, improve these allocations by streamlining processes, reducing administrative burden, and continuing to meet student needs. So the feedback that we generally send under here is quite open-ended. Some members have already sent feedback. The problem this year, we normally do a whole posted consultation to the public for our own public on this consultation guide. They have made a feedback deadline of October 27th this year. So usually it's due sometime in December. This year, they've decided they want their feedback by October 27th, so we don't have a lot of time to go out in that public posting. So Leanne sent an email or forwarded information from Craig Snyder, and I want to invite members to send feedback to me so I can get it to Craig. And I apologize for the deadline. We need to get it back as soon as possible. So it was sent out last week by Leanne. It's on the ministry consultation on on the GSNs, on the grants for student need. And we need to get feedback to staff, especially on the special education portion, by the 20th. So they have to meet a deadline from the ministry for October 27th.
Yes, if I may make a comment, I think that's exactly the timeline for the government, budget process. Yeah. If we need anything to be into the budget, that will be kind of adopted in spring for next year budget. That is now that things happen. And you remember that oftentimes I've asked, Greg Snyder to push the ministry to ask our input at this time, because this is the fall is the beginning of the cycle for the government strategic planning process, the way they call it now. Yes, David, Richard.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a question for all trustees in attendance tonight and those attending online. Can you share with SEAC and tell us unequivocally how SEAC's minutes, be they draft or approved, are put forth to trustees, and how motions are put forth to trustees in terms of the process and policy as they exist today, in terms of, does every trustee receive our motions as they are set out from SEAC? When Leanne puts out the minutes, be it draft or otherwise, do all trustees receive them? What is the mechanism? Or does it go to a committee and then, or is it edited? I'm trying to understand for SEAC how you actually see the minutes, motions, and how these are received by you and kind of the timeline.
Thank you, Richard. This is a great question. Can we please focus on this consultation that is now, and we may go back to that question when we have time at the end of the meeting.
I can answer it quickly.
I think we don't.
I was going to say, you can just say a quick yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
sorry,
it goes to all trustees.
Yeah, sorry, this is not related to what we're discussing now. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're no longer allowed to ask trustees questions as part of the meeting?
No, it is, sorry, Richard, that is a great question, but what we're discussing now, it is this consultation with the ministry.
So that's the only topic on the floor tonight?
No, for this item. We may go back to your question that you asked, under other business. Sorry. Any question, comment about, this consultation? Another thing that you will probably note is that the ministry is also reviewing the special education grant, has already reviewed that, and now in the process of reviewing, the SIP and the C allocations. And those are the things that we should probably, we won't, let us do everything to not to miss this window and really focus on that. Because I know that for the SIP allocation, there are also some work happening now. I think that is, as we're thinking about some of the feedback around this consultation, and maybe Nora, who is working on the draft SIP letter from SIAC, can provide us with an update. Thanks, Nora, for doing, all this. These are things that we need to push to make sure that we have something.
No problem.
And also under the leadership of guidance of Trustee Arts. Thanks, Trustee Arts. Yes, go. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to thank,
The SIP
Andy
letter,
sent
yes.
the costs for the data we requested about how the funding gap from what a SIP fund amount would be and how much it actually costs to put another staff member in a room. So I'm going to incorporate that into the letter so they realize how shortfall the underfunding is for SIP. So I'll be drafting a letter telling the ministry that the funding is insufficient to provide for the needs for the students anywhere. And I can get that to you hopefully by the end of this week so you can read it. And then hopefully next month, then it's just, you can sign it and send it off because we'll all approve it. And then I'm assuming that our communication is sent to other CX so that they would do similar things.
I don't know if we have a timing for sending the letter, or we can have that approved by the next meeting.
Yeah, that's what Nora was saying, that.
No, because you say next week, this week, or.
Nora said we'll have a draft of the letter. She'll have a draft of the letter finished so it can go out to members by the end of the week. So everybody has time to read it before the November meeting, and then it can be approved, and then it can be sent from SIAC.
Okay, thank you, Nia. Okay, and I think that is, was the working group, the budget working group, I think is Richard. I don't know, for the budget working group, maybe we should probably find a way to coordinate all this, this consultation and the membership for the working group and see how we can reconvene.
Yeah, I just looked online at the membership, and as Nora just noted, she just joined. So I know when I looked the other day, I think I was the only name on there. So I obviously didn't call a meeting with myself, but there is a couple people on there now. If anybody else wishes to be on there, I would encourage you to join up immediately, because I would hope to have a meeting in advance of the deadline for the GSN. And I wonder, is there any staff member assigned to the working group at this point for the budget?
Richard, I think that you said it by yourself. My name is not longer there.
I think yourself, Nora, and myself are the only three now, right?
Okay.
I believe. I don't know if there's any staff assigned. I think we should have a staff member assigned if we have a meeting.
There are 2 staff assigned.
Thank you.
I think Leo was also there. Eh? Leo? I think. No,
And Jordan?
Yeah, I saw your name because some of the feedback that you provided for.
Oh, I did provide feedback, yes. I
That
did.
means you're a member of the working group?
No, I'm not a member. I just like to give feedback.
Yeah, I think you don't know. Yeah. Okay, I think that is, Richard, will kind of make sure that we have a budget working group meeting, if it's possible. I don't know if it is possible this week before the 20th to, kind of, leverage what Trustee Arts will be doing, because she's repping a lot, with this, and to have the SIAC feedback, coordinated. Is this something that we can put in the minute that a meeting, working group sometime this week? Richard, reasonable?
I will request of staff and ask that an invite be sent out.
Microphone?
I'll request that of staff and that a meeting request be sent out and make sure everybody's, see whoever's available for,
Okay.
say, Thursday night, if that's an option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Leanne. You probably, coordinate with Richard to have the meeting happen this week. Okay, thank you, everyone. And we're expecting, feedback, a report from the working group next month. And item number 6, we did 5 already, thanks Nora. And number 6, exclusion, refusal to admit. I think that is for this item. Before, going over some of the issues that were noted, we'll give the floor to staff first to provide us with a kind of overview of the situation before we have Nora, who brought the issue forward, to tell us.
Sorry, Jean-Paul, we still have some working group updates. Are we on that agenda item still?
Sorry,
Sorry, no, we're not on working group. We're on number 6.
6.
Oh,
The staff, please. Is what the status? How do exclusion, refusal to admit look like
Thanks.
in the system?
Thank you. So I'm fully aware that some members may be familiar with refusal to admit / exclusions in the TDSB. So I'm just going to set the context to ensure everyone has common understanding, and then I'm going to talk about how that looks or what that looks like in the TDSB specifically. So the use of exclusions fall under the Education Act under Section 265M. It is subject to an appeal to the board, and a refusal to admit to a school or to a classroom is actually at the principal's judgment, and it's towards a person whose presence in the school or classroom would be detrimental to the physical or mental well-being of pupils in the school, students in the schools. I'm using the Education Act terminology, or to the student themselves. Please note that under the Education Act and under TDSB procedure as well, which I'll get into, it's only to be used as a last resort. And we do consider mitigating factors in terms of if, for example, there's violence by a student, is it linked to their exceptionality or disability? Exclusions, we always consider using as a safety mechanism, and there is always a focus on returning the student as soon as possible to school. And we focus on providing educational supports in the interim for the time that they are not present at school. As always, communication is key with the appropriate staff and most importantly with the family. So that's just a context-setting piece under the Education Act. In terms of TDSB specific, TDSB has a procedure, PR 724, called...
May I, the question here is that, is there any issue in TDSB with regard to the exclusion and refusal to admit? Is there any issue?
So...
Yes. What is the magnitude of the issue?
I will get to that.
If no question, we go back to the staff, to member, to tell us what they have experienced. And if yes, what's the magnitude? What is TDSB doing to address the issue to reduce that?
Yeah. Thank you, and through you, Chair. If I may, from our last conversation, Chair, it was evident that we needed to build a shared understanding of what the process is, and we do have data to be sharing, but if you would indulge us, we would like to explain the process so that we are completely clear, because I think for association members, having that knowledge will help to redirect a parent to the parent complaint protocol, or just to help guide the process. So we know that we have 20 minutes for this discussion, and we really had a sense from SEAC members that they wanted to know fulsomely what our documentation says. So if we may, Chair, I know that Nandi will be brief. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I say that. It's only because you know I wanted us to go straight to if there's any issue. Maybe addressing the issue will be sharing the whole process with members so that they can know the process and exactly what is the process. If from your perspective there's no issue coming your way, we just listen to Nora and to tell us what she heard about the issues. That's why, I mean, to save time too. Is that okay? Maybe
So,
you just go straight, highlight the process or the
Yes,
procedure,
thank you.
and tell us if there's any issue, coming your way that you are aware of.
Thank you, Chair. We will outline the process. Andy?
Thank you. So in the Toronto District School Board, we do have a procedure, PR 724. Exclusions and refusal to admit are used interchangeably. So at the ministry, it's called exclusion. We call it refusal to admit, so that they mean the same thing. I do want to note that many boards do not have a procedure for exclusions, and I want to acknowledge that being new to the TDSB, I was told that SEAC actually championed the procedure for refusal to admit, so thank you to SEAC for your efforts on that in years past. So again, our procedure establishes the duty to refuse to admit to the school or classroom in line with the regulation. A person whose presence in the school or classroom would be detrimental to the physical or mental well-being of students. And the procedure actually supports the implementation of the Caring and Safe Schools policy. And the reason that I'm stating this is that refusal to admit is not a student with special education procedure. It's for all students that may be applied to students with special education needs as well. And our procedure aims to balance the legislative authority of the principal, which I stated earlier falls under the Education Act, with the needs of students and families when we consider to refuse to admit a student to a school for reasons of safety. And so there are a number of factors that are considered before we can embark on a refusal to admit, and we need to show that we have done a number of things before we've made a decision for a refusal to admit. So can the student's presence, which is detrimental to the physical or mental well-being of students, be minimized by, for example, a modified programming related to their learning needs, reassigning staff within the school to support the student, temporarily relocating the student somewhere in the school, temporarily assigning appropriate staff to the school. Those are some measures that we would explore as examples before we even get to refusal to admit. In terms of data, what I would like to share with you, and again, this falls under Caring and Safe Schools, in 2017-18, there were no responsive records. Records, as we know, we're shifting slowly to electronic data collection. And so records from 2017-18 were no responsive records means that they were destroyed consistent with privacy rules. So we have no responsive records for 2017-18, 18-19. For 2019-20, the numbers actually fall, and this is again for the entire TDSB. This is why I said earlier, refusal to admit is not only for students with special education needs. So for 2019-20, the numbers fall below the threshold for reporting. So the numbers were suppressed to protect the identities of students. So I want to be clear that the numbers were so small that we did not report on them to protect the students' identities. There's a risk that the students' identities could be discovered. That was the same for the 2021 school year and the same for the 21-22 school year. In the 2022-23 school year, there were 31 refusal to admit across the entire TDSB, and we did not disaggregate further as it risks identifying students, as I mentioned earlier. So that is the number that we provide, 31 refusal to admit across the TDSB in the 2022-2023 school year. So I'm going to wrap up by citing our TDSB expectations. And sorry, Nora, if I could just finish.
Let me questions after.
Yeah, can I finish and then we go to questions? Thank you. I just want to finish off with the TDSB expectations and what we might be hearing from associations or from families or from schools. So exclusions or refusals to admit are to be implemented in the same way across the district. That's why we have a procedure for this. When a case occurs, the principal must consult with the superintendent, with caring and safe under which the procedure falls, and if applicable, special education and inclusion staff. As I said earlier, we truly try to make this a last resort, and we make all efforts to engage and communicate with families throughout the process. This is not something that a principal can simply do. It involves collaborative consultation and decision-making. I do want to acknowledge and recognize that if there are outliers in terms of principals or superintendents not following the process, we continue to support as a department, as does Caring and Safe, around TDSB expectations, as well as with professional learning, so they understand how to support a student with or without special education needs in a school before getting to that point. I want to be clear that if there is someone that is engaging in practices around refusal to admit that we're not aware of, that they're contravening and contradicting TDSB, not only TDSB procedures, but our values around students with special education needs and all students with regards to exclusions and refusals to admit. So we acknowledge that there might be stories of principals calling parents to come and pick up their children for reasons related to externalized behaviors that may lead to safety risks. We are working on this, as I said earlier, with regards to changing mindsets and capacity building of how to support students in buildings. And we are definitely not of the opinion that the solution is excluding students or engaging in the refusal to admit process unnecessarily. That being said, I want to reiterate that the health and safety for the student themselves, as well as for everyone else in the building, does take priority. So in summary, we are working diligently to become a process-strong or a process-rich organization. There is a refusal to admit procedure, and we work to ensure that administrators, superintendents, as well as executive superintendents understand and follow these processes. We have asked the ministry to provide clear direction around exclusions, including data collection around exclusions to all school boards. And I believe that SEAC can actually advocate to the ministry, to the province around direction on exclusions as well. As I said earlier, we're working on changing mindsets. What are your beliefs about students with special education needs? What are your biases, and what are those biases doing to create barriers? And this is true not just in special education, but connected to everything that we do. And we continue to build the capacity of school and system leaders through ongoing and repeated communication and professional learning. And lastly, I'd like SEAC to know that we are emphasizing accountability in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nandi. It's you, Nora. The floor is for you now. I know, I mean, this is your item.
Well, didn't know my name. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the data, because I was a little frustrated when the ministry used pandemic data on it. I don't think that's an accurate reflection of what a system looks like when it's up and running. But I did want to go back to something that Associate Director Srisco mentioned, which was having a common understanding of refusal to admit. And I'm not feeling, so when I hear the policy and refusal for admit wouldn't apply to the vast majority of students I know who are being denied access to school. It's not about their aggression or their safety necessarily. It's not that there's been a history and there's a huge process. Some of them haven't even gotten in the door that far. Some of them haven't even shown up to school. In many cases, families are afraid to follow your parent of concern protocol because for a multitude of reasons. Often it's about, I always say it's a terrible thing, but I know with my own child, I used to remind myself that there was a hostage going to school every day. So if somebody was irritated with me, my child would have to live with whatever the brunt of their frustration with me might be. And many families feel that viscerally, actually. I also feel that many families, particularly in the TDSB, where we would have so many people where English wouldn't be their first language, newcomers to the country, people who have fear of authority figures for legitimate reasons. Why would they think they should follow a parent of concern protocol about what's happening to their child? Why would they think they're empowered to do that? So quite frankly, modified days, principals deciding for, and often framed as the health and well-being of the child involved, not other children. Parents are being told their child can come for an hour, 2 hours, not at all. We'll let you know. It's quite an array. And so refusal to admit is not actually my primary issue. Everybody kept saying that. I think, Associate Director, I heard all the ways I was talking about students not being able to come, not one policy. Because that policy, quite frankly, those are parents, they're holding their guns against a big system and saying, my kid has a right to come, and you're forced to implement a procedure to keep them out. That's a small group of parents. They fit in the palm of your hands. 31, I would agree, in a system your size, you would have mental health issues probably beyond your control. Like, I don't doubt that there are students that need more than just an education because healthcare systems are terrible. But there are some kids who just from the mere showing up that because they appear that they have Down syndrome, they appear autistic, they appear like they have physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and people in schools are making arbitrary decisions. I think our committee needs to know what's being done about that, because anecdotally, all of us are really alarmed by what our associations are hearing. Quite frankly, I don't have kids in the system. I'm only connected through the TDSB, through this association, this my organization, this group of people, and walk in my neighborhood. Why are my neighbors stopping and asking me that? Right? Like, why am I finding so many people just on my own living in my neighborhood? They're asking about this. So I think if we went around and we talked to Autism Ontario, we talked to Community Living, I think they have a story to tell. And unfortunately, and I do, unfortunately, because I see the sincerity with which you come to the table, somehow the system, quite overwhelmed, is regressing in some ways about disability, is my fear. And so I'm opening it to what I'm asking for is all, I understand we can't catch informal, like come get them, they're having a bad day, despite the fact that's a huge employment issue. That's the other thing I hear from families. How many of them are talking about not holding jobs anymore? And in this economy, when a grocery bag of $200 fits in one little baggie from Loblaws, we can't afford to force families into single income or no income homes. So they're very serious things. I don't think that's equitably happening. I have a feeling if I showed up, it wouldn't be happening to my kid. I'm just saying, but I think it happens to other people who don't feel so empowered. And that's not equity, which I think is what you guys are trying to take on. So I think we need to hear from some other associations about what they're experiencing, because I know I've been pretty vocal about it, but I would like to hear from other associations if they're having similar experiences.
Thank you, Nora. Thanks again for bringing this, championing this this agenda item. I think that is. I would suggest that staff takes note, and we'll go around. We have Leo, and hear from all the issues that the members are bringing up, and listen to staff to to either acknowledge or telling us what they have been doing if they heard this about before.
John Paul,
thank you,
it's
Chair.
David. I just want to make sure I'm on your list.
You're coming after it will be you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
mean, after you, we have Steve. After Steve is David.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Nora. Nora and I spoke, and this is really one of the main priorities for Autism Ontario. We have a very big constituency, lots of parents, and we are absolutely flooded with the stories of exclusions, both soft and hard. I speak to a number of those parents myself, and I have many stories. But anyway, what I want to bring up is slightly different. I want to provide a statistical exercise. After all, we are in a school. So let me just first make clear that exclusions that I will refer to in my sample are those that are in clear violation of the Education Act. For example, when a principal tells the family, like Nora mentioned, that the student can only come to class a few hours per day because they don't have enough resources, right? Well, according to the information that you just provided, 31 students were excluded from the TDSB during 2022 academic year. In contrast, since the very beginning of this school year, the 2023 school year, a number of parents have engaged with Autism Ontario, many of which I have spoken to personally. A number of those have reported soft or hard exclusions. And I must say that while ours is a small sample compared to your student population, it is still informative enough for some statistical analysis. And this is something that always comes back, the thing, data versus what's anecdotal. But statistics can help us here. If we use Fisher's exact test, which is a method well suited for small sample sizes and rare events, the test actually yields a p-value of 0.0008. And that indicates that the difference in exclusion rates between my 2023 sample and your reported data is statistically significant at a p-level less than 0.05. So to summarize that, it is mathematically improbable, actually closer to impossible, that the board's number is accurate. So alternatively, if the number is correct, we could actually be witnessing an alarming escalation in exclusions with just 1 year between your data and my sample. Regardless, if your number is very horribly wrong, or if we're actually having an alarming escalation in exclusions, both scenarios require urgent attention and action. It's our duty to ensure, it's your duty to ensure that the accuracy of your data and to investigate the underlying causes of such alarming patterns. There's clear underreporting in how the data is collected. Personally, I trust the statistics. This has to be revisited, and exclusions are one of our top priorities at Autism Ontario. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Leo. Steve?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. As Leo has just mentioned, there is a vast misreporting of the exclusion of students. There should not be a difference. If the ministry is using exclusions and the board is using refusal to admit, the ministry document actually includes refusals to admit. Refusal to admit is supposed to be a big deal, but there's no reason that it cannot be covered under expulsions and suspensions, which carry their own procedures, their own reporting procedures, and not this abstract refusal to admit, come pick up your kid, they're not allowed today because whatever. And it happens an extraordinarily large amount of times. Another way it's done is to say, no, your student cannot come on this field trip. Your student cannot go to this event. Your student cannot ride on the bus. Your student, we don't have anyone to administer the medication, so your student is not allowed. And I'm not talking anecdotally. I have had conversations with principals who have said, your student cannot come on this field trip because we are not going to take care of them because they have a seizure disorder. That principal said, I'm going to call my superintendent. And my response was, okay, so are you going to tell them, or are you two going to decide which one of you is refusing to allow this student to attend a trip? Because that's what's happening. A principal and a superintendent, that's not enough. Nandy commented that executive superintendents are involved in this, but there is no, as far as I can see with looking at Nandy, Louise, and anyone else in the special ed department, there is no executive level person at any executive level meeting that supports specifically special ed students. It's not even on the table as a conversation piece. So refusal to admit is being just used as a casual way for principals to support their teachers saying, I don't want this kid in my classroom. It has to stop, and there needs to be accountability on every single principal, because if they're using refusal to admit, they're not reporting it properly. If they use expulsions and suspensions, they have to report it. It has to stop, period. There is no reason for this board to say we accept refusal to admit because it's in the Education Act. This board needs to step up and say, we're not going to use refusal to admit because it's archaic, It's more intended for adults and non-students of the school who come in and threaten the environment. It's not for students. And this board should be the one leading the province saying, we understand it's there, but we disagree with it in principle. We have other mechanisms that can address the issue of student attendance. And all these little bits of students going home, come pick up your kid, can't go on a trip and other stuff, that needs to be documented. And it is not just a special ed problem. So it needs to be documented by the entire board and not left to the handful of people that are trying to support 50,000 students in this board, specifically with special ed. So that's my piece. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I hope staff is taking notes. And a little suggestion that I will make here is that we listen to all the members on this, and I will let staff, go back and prepare all the responses to this for next meeting. We'll have another agenda item for this, Nandi, and we'll move on. After we listen to all members, we'll move on to the next item, the agenda item, to make sure that we have time for working groups updates. Thank you. David.
Okay, it's David. Is it my turn?
Go ahead, David.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to give me the same flexibility on time that you gave the last couple of speakers, because I've lived this issue and researched this issue for weeks and led the work by SEAC on this issue back in 2017, 2018. Here's my feedback. If I listen to what Nandi said as an aspirational statement of what TDSB aspires to be their practice, I say 3 cheers. But it was expressed not as an aspiration of what we want, but it was a statement of what they do. And that seems to fly in the face of what several associations are reporting. That is deeply troubling. I want to focus on some very specific details. Number one, it is accurate when Nandi said that this isn't limited to students with special ed needs as a practical, as a black letter matter, as a formal matter, just like disciplines aren't, and suspensions are not limited to any one racialized community. But in practice, just as discipline has been disproportionately a matter of concern when it disproportionately affects racialized people, and it is a legitimate and serious concern, there is ample support for the fact that refusals to admit are disproportionately a disability concern. This is a human rights issue. When Nandi said that we have to balance safety of or the legislative requirement against the needs of students with disabilities and so on. The fact is, number one, the TDSB's own policy does not limit it to safety when it can be used. And it's not a matter of balancing the needs of students with disabilities. It's a matter of balancing their right to an education and their human right to be free of discrimination based on disability. And viewing as just balancing their needs seriously distorts the balance. We were told just now that we could get the number 31 for this year, but not for prior years because it might risk disclosing the identity of students. Respectfully, that just doesn't make sense. Because if the number for last year was 20 or 15 or 8, none of us would have a clue who they are by the simple number. So we should be given the number for every year. If it's only 1, we still won't know which one of thousands of students that is. We're not asking for any specifics about them. Now, the policy in the board is that every principal that does a refusal to admit, and it doesn't distinguish between soft or hard, the exercise of saying, John, pick up your kid, or Mary, pick up your kid, that is a refusal to admit. They are by requirement of the policy to report it in writing. and by the procedure that this is to be the subject of quarterly reports to the executive board within TDSB. I asked last month, I asked in writing today, I repeat today, right now, can we please have those reports? And if there's anything that remotely would identify the students or the learning centers, black it out. The final thing I want to say about it is this, and we need that accountability. The final thing I want to say about this, if in this, there are rigorous requirements governing legal and policy requirements governing when and how discipline in the form of suspensions or expulsions can be deployed. And that is the way it should be. And there are detailed reporting requirements. If a principal suspended or expelled a student said, well, I just told them go home, but it's an expulsion and I'm not going to report, the board wouldn't view that as we need to modify the principal's expectation or achieve a common understanding. They'd say they're in violation of a fundamental policy requirement of the board. That should be the case with refusals to admit as well, especially because it is a disability human rights issue. So I think I conclude with the following two pieces of feedback. Number one, if the board thinks that its description of what it aspires to is actually what's going on, there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And second, we ask again that the board disclose to us, blacking out anything that might identify anyone, those quarterly reports that by requirement they are to be prepared, or tell us that they weren't prepared even though the policy requires it. And finally, it would be helpful to know what the board is prepared to do to not just try to raise expectation of principals, but to set as a requirement that whether it's a formal, informal, whether they consider it a refusal to admit, or whatever it may be, if they tell a parent, don't bring your kid to school today or come and get them, they are engaging in a refusal to admit, and they must report it in writing. Otherwise, the policy doesn't mean anything. Back to you, JP.
Thank you. I think we have two more, and we'll close this, feedback from members. We have Rowan. Please, if
Thank you so much. I want to just thank everyone who has brought this to the table. This is so important, and this is a huge issue. The data that we received tonight completely is off. It doesn't match, and the big problem is using like the privacy issue. Again, are we asking families about this? Has anyone gone to the families and asked them? Because many families I know in organizations like us, we always ask consent, and they will give us our name. They will totally agree to having things documented. So I think there's some slippery business there, to be honest, where people aren't being given the opportunity to also document because they would want to have their child's name documented. So I think that's something that needs to be looked into of why, because it seems to be giving too much freedom to get away with more at the end that's going to be protecting the TDSB. Secondly, I also, the daily phone calls, the daily pickups, that is happening all the time. I've raised this concern before, and I want to thank everyone again for doing this. And that needs to be documented by doing research. I would like the TDSB to actually go through and research and give us surveys like they did with COVID, like they did about what we feel, what was us as families really truly care about our kids' experience, what we really want. Can we please see that from people who have attended the TDSB as families and organizations and actually get the real raw data and not just have, I appreciate what you've done and brought to us tonight, but it is not really factual at all. There is so much gaps and faults in this, and I'd like to see fully researching so you can understand how to change this going forward because it does not add up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rowan. And, last, Isabella.
Hey, Thank you so much, and I want to thank everybody else who actually spoke. And I just have a very just quick question, because the one aspect of refusal to admit, I imagine also has to do with the capacity of teachers to know how to deal with students with certain disabilities, and also to have the facilities that can, for example, calm students down. And so my question is, how many of these cases are related to the fact that perhaps teachers don't have those skills? And in all honesty, one gains those skills through practice by actually being on sites where this is being done. And so I imagine that this could be a problem. But I would like to, I think it would be very useful to know whether this is a major issue. And also, in this way, this would be something that could be possibly even resolved by bringing some of the teachers to our congregated sites where you actually have the most complex cases and teenagers. So I guess that's all I just wanted to mention. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Isabella. I think that is, as a next step from this, I saw that staff was taking note. We're taking note, and we'll have an agenda item next month to have staff, go through, systematically go through all these issues that we have raised and provide us with answer to them. I think that's, we don't know, I think that is maybe, Associate Director has very quick thing to add here before we move, to the next item, knowing that they will have plenty of time next month to go through some of these issues that we have raised.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just very quickly to express my gratitude to each of our SEAC member who raised the issue and spoke so passionately with stories that they had facilitated with families who had experienced either a refusal to admit or a request for a modified day. And I want to suggest that this is absolutely a shared interest matter between staff and SEAC members that we may wish to nominate for deep work over the course of this year. And just to be identifying that, I think that some of the anecdotes that you were sharing cross into something that we call a modified day, and to express gratitude and earnestness of the intention to do this good work to staff. It is not a requirement from the ministry to gather data on modified days, and through the leadership of Nandy Palmer, we are gathering that for the first time across our system for the shared interest that you have in that, to have our students attend a full day to the greatest of their potential. So I just want to express gratitude to SEAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director Sirisco. As I said, next month we'll have plenty of time for staff to respond to some of the issue that we have raised. And thank you for everything. And now the next agenda item, I will turn to Leanne. If there's any working group that sent you an email saying that they will be providing an update on request.
Sorry, the K-12 group, as well as the special ed plan and the EPWG, I believe, have all put in a request for some time.
The PWG?
The effective practices.
Okay. Okay, the thing is, please let us share this time, remaining time among, is two of them, the K-12 and the effective practice.
Dave, yes. So David asked for a few minutes and Melissa has asked for a few minutes.
Okay. Dave, K-12 standard working, accessibility standard working group. Update, please.
Okay, good. I'm going to try to do it in 90 seconds. We're focusing as a first priority on the subject that Richard talked about earlier, what can we do to effectively inform parents about what options are available, where to go to advocate for them, and how to take part? To that end, we have met with communications staff for the first time after asking for a long time to be able to do so. Appreciate it. Having a follow-up meeting November 3rd, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to come back to you with an opportunity once we do a first round of giving feedback and get some kind of proposed plan from them, even as a draft, to come back to this committee to go around the table and do kind of what we just did on refusals to admit, and gather your input. But rather than doing it at large, I want to have something before you that you can comment on. So stay tuned. And if you have any suggestions, you can either come to our November 3rd group meeting at 3 o'clock on Zoom, or just flip me an email and we'll, on what you think the board should be doing to strategies to communicate with parents about what options are available in a way that reaches everybody and that is useful information. Just let me know, or come to our meeting, or both. Back to you.
Thank you, David. I think that is we started, started 10 minutes late, and can we catch up the 10 minutes now to have, okay, thank you, Richard. Anyone seconding that we catch up our 10 minutes, thank you. And we'll go past, 9, 10. Okay. Thank you, David. Any quick question, burning question for David? If not, I see none. Let's go to effective practice working group. Is it Kristen or Melissa?
It's going to be Kirsten.
Okay. Kristen?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for giving me this time. I will try to be brief. As you know, we sent out a survey of basically things that we can do around how meetings are run and everything surrounding that, such as the distribution of documentation and presenting motions and all of that kind of stuff. Over the weekend, I sent out a document to everybody with the results of that survey. I apologize for the fact that I only sent it out over the weekend. We had major technical issues, just getting the data into a usable document. So apologies for that. I did get some questions emailed to me, which I endeavored to answer to the best of my ability. Hopefully I have accomplished that. If everybody is in agreement, I'm going to skip over actually reading the questions and responses because everybody has it in the document. But in summary, we had majority or unanimous yes responses to every question, with the exception of one where we had 50% yes responses. And we put together a very brief motion which basically says anything that we had yes or majority or unanimous responses to, we would like to put those into we would like to start a kind of a SEAC guidelines document, put all of those statements into that document, and then that document would be a living document that we would add to as we continue with this work. I would like to know, Mr. Chair, if I would be able to very quickly present this very brief motion.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Unless the motion is read in full, I have no way of knowing what's in it. And unless it's read in full and there is an opportunity to discuss, we cannot vote on what one member is telling us. Whether I agree with it or not, unless I can read it and it is read out loud and recorded into the minutes, it's a non-starter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And as I said in in one of the email that I sent, I think, I don't know if it's today or yesterday, because saying that it is great to see that we're doing, some of the member and particularly member from Effective Practice Working Group putting together some of the, the tools that will help us improve the way that we operate or we function. And at the same time, we have existing tools, and I think there was an orientation today. And when I personally, even though this, came after we received everything for this meeting, I tried to go, to scan the document. I didn't see, the current status, seeing something like that will begin with, the way we do things now. And before suggesting anything that we can do to improve the way we do things now. I think that is my understanding even in what I do in my day job. I think that is, we already have something that is comparable to a policy in place, and we're coming with the guidelines. And in the hierarchy of, policy document, guidelines is something below that, something that we just do it. And for all these reasons, and with the timing, and not kind of aligning with what we do, I would suggest that we defer this conversation, the discussion into this, because we have a process. We just saw that at the beginning of the meeting, Autism Ontario was coming with a motion. That ended up having a collaborative conversation with staff, and everything was resolved. I think that's this. I will expect something to happen. Another thing that, I would suggest is that I think it was mentioned at the orientation that all the meetings from the working group be published so that we know when the working groups are meeting and to see if other members can attend and even the public can attend. And I think that is making sure that Leanne, who helped with all of this, is aware of all these meetings so that she can post that to our website and see if people can attend, because that is something that we need to follow in the process. And this is have to. It's not our choice to publish or not publish the meetings that we're having under SIAC. And that is, what I would suggest we defer this discussion here and listen to the Special Education Working Group plan, Special Education Plan Working Group. Yes, Melissa, any comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so the survey was distributed in June. A number of email follow-ups were sent since then, asking people to fill it in. So all SEAC reps had access to it. A majority of reps did complete it. All that this motion is saying, and for Steve's reference, it's a very short motion in Kirsten's email, and it basically says, for all of the statements that had a majority.
I'm sorry, point of order, Chair. Unless a motion is read in full, it cannot be discussed.
We heard you. A member want to speak. We let her speak. Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, so it's a pretty short motion. Kirsten could read it, but I'm not sure that's the best use of our limited time. But if it's insisted she could, I think it's just 4 very short statements.
Chair, I am sorry. Point of order. To imply that it's not necessary and to insult my integrity about whether or not this is appropriate wasting time. There is a procedure. And if the members from the Effective Working Practices Group do not want to follow the procedure that has been established for years on this committee by sending out material well in advance and reading the stuff into the minutes, this is a waste of time.
Stephen, I heard you, and a member wanted to speak. We'll let her speak. And now, what I can say, because of what I said earlier, we will defer this because of the reason that I already stated. And this will be discussed when we see how, this suggestion, these are great suggestions. And the way that we will probably have to take them we need to build that into, everything that Leanne and Nandi presented as the policy today, at the policy during the orientation, to make sure that we're not voting on something that is not, fully aligned with what we have. That's only what I'm saying. And for that, you please, accept that we defer this and we move to the next, the next working group.
Yes,
And
sorry,
to hear from, please, to hear from what the next working group will have to say, and we conclude the meeting. And this is not closing the item.
Right, so I'm nodding, I agree.
All
I
together.
agree with you about deferring.
That's the next, that's the action items, and to look into the suggestion for effective practice working group and see how we can build that into what we have in place and see if there's anything we can improve and bring this back next month. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay.
And,
So I'm the next one up.
The special education plan working group,
Yeah.
please.
So,
Is that for the special education plan working group?
yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
I must start by commending all of the working group members in all of the working groups for the enormous amount of time and work they volunteer in between meetings on both of those effective practices and special education plan.
We are now with special education plan working
We
group.
welcome any input, and if anyone has any questions about anything we're doing, either the EPWG survey questions or the special education plan working group recommendations, we really welcome offline contact because we just don't have enough time in our monthly SEAC meetings. So I encourage people to join. It's a great group of people who sacrifice enormously, and I really appreciate all the work that people do. So now on the special education plan working group, on that note, Isabella was going to give the update today. She has spent an enormous amount of time over the last couple of weeks supporting her PhD students who she's responsible for. So at the last minute, I have been assigned to give the update. Richard also backed off. Okay, so Leanne has, I just sent her a couple things to put on screen, and while she's doing that, I'll just say, you're going to get an email soon from Isabella or Richard that will have all of this information, but we wanted to have
Please, through
it touched.
Leanne.
While Leanne is doing that,
Yes, through Leanne. Yes, sending all this. We send to Leanne to the liaison she will share with all of us.
okay, so there's two things I want to communicate. One is we're doing special education plan feedback a little differently this year. There's, just hang on one second, Leanne, thank you. There's 5 different ways we're going to have sources of feedback. One is if anybody hears anything or knows of anything, you hear from parents, they have a concern or a suggestion, tell us. That's feedback. The second is, in SEAC, we raise a lot of issues like refusals to admit. People are providing feedback on that. If that could be encapsulated and sent to the special education plan working group, we'll document it and put it into our annual feedback. The third is, what we're trying this year, which is a little bit different, is, okay, so if we can just scroll down, Leanne. What we're trying this year is a little different, is we're going to have a systematic review of the plan. Okay, not that part, Leanne, but okay, while we're here, we'll just look at this. So this is a feedback form, and there's a link all over the plan. At the bottom of the table of contents, at the beginning of every section, you click on it, and you give your feedback. So it's very easy. Just click on it, provide your feedback, it'll get to all the right places. Leanne, if we could go to the information that lists A through U. So there's a couple of places online on our SEAC webpage. One lists all of the new sections of the special education plan. Nandi rewrote it a couple years ago. There's a whole bunch of sections, and what we're going to do starting in November is divide all of those sections into chunks. And every month, we'll ask in advance if people could just look at that group of chunk, and if you have any feedback on it, provide it. So we're trying to make it more digestible. And we're grouping it by topics. So there's going to be a chunk that's about organization. There's going to be a chunk about identification and placement. There's going to be a chunk about IEPs. and so on. Okay, yeah, this isn't it either, but here we are into the actual plan. Oh, that thing at the top that Leanne is showing, you click on that and it takes you to the feedback form. Leanne, can you get into the table of contents if you scroll up, or if not, just scroll through the pages really fast? You're in something else there. Okay, anyway, the plan is very long, but it has lots of headings, and so if there's something that you're interested in, you don't have to read all couple hundred pages. Look at the table of contents, click on the section you're interested in, and if you have some feedback on it, please let us know. So hopefully Leanne can find the list of A to T. If not, that's fine. And then there's two other sources of feedback we're going to have. One is when staff is working on things proactively or emerging issues, we'd like to hear about it at SEAC so we can give feedback before it's cast in stone. So that's another piece. Staff comes to us and says, we're working on this new policy. Does anybody have any feedback? If you have feedback, provide it, and we'll capture it. And then the last way is the Special Education Plan Working Group did a very extensive feedback document, which is posted on our website with SEAC minutes from September 2021. It had a lot of feedback in it, which we couldn't address all in 1 year. So there were some policy items in there that we had to defer forward, and our group is going to try to go back into those, pick a couple priorities, and see if we can have those addressed this year also. So anyway, all of this will be in an email. It's just to sort of get your feet wet and encourage everyone to either join a working group or provide feedback or talk to anybody in a working group if you have any questions about what's going on or you're unsure about anything. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. I think that is it will be a good idea to coordinate all the meetings of the working group with Leanne so that she share that with everyone who would like to attend, or because it's not closed. These working groups are not closed. Anyone can attend, even without being a member. And by knowing that the meeting is happening, and even staff, hoping that staff will be attending these meetings as well. Okay, thank you everyone, for everything. I think that is, the parent and caregiver as partner conference. I know that we had a, I think that is Richard is
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a very quick.
holding the baton for this.
On this weekend is the Parents and Caregivers Partners Conference. I know everybody at SEAC has been made aware of this conference. I trust you've had it promoted through your own organizations and associations and through your community groups. Maybe you could just show of hands that everybody that got the email and who has been able to get it out there to their communities. Curious how many SEAC members are signed up for the conference, and specifically what sections. We'd like feedback. They're asking about the conference now, the organizers, will we continue this each year? So it would be invaluable to understand from a special education perspective the feedback of the members of this team and our community as a whole as to the value they're finding in the topics on special education and the value in having this conference. So I'd encourage you all to attend the meeting online, virtually, check the flyer out, and give me your feedback prior to the next meeting, please, because I'd like to take this back to the committee that I've been asked to sit on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks for doing everything that you're doing for SEAC to be present at all this, at the table when we discuss the planning for the conference. And next month, we already have refusal to exclusion, refusal to admit that will come back, and IEPs and transportation. Those are some of the things that, key things that will be discussed next month, November 13. And I think that is, I didn't see any correspondence, new correspondence, and also, yes, a motion to adjourn. Leo, seconded by Richard. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. I hope we all enjoy these evening meetings, and the November one will be even more enjoyable. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Safe trip back home.